Hey, I'm moving into my new office, and so it's not complete yet, but I've been setting furniture up all day today and constructing it. And I just got done putting together my Eames chair. And I wanted to start doing just different series on people that I find interesting and people who I think are kind of inspiring, just to kind of celebrate creativity and inspiration. And so I wanted to talk today about Charles Eames. Charles Eames was a designer who worked with Ray Eames, his wife, throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And Charles Eames was a modernist. He's actually kicked out of architecture school because he continues to advocate for Frank Lloyd Wright's Usonian phase, which is where Frank Lloyd Wright was trying to build homes that were for just middle-income families. He was trying to use resources very practically. The Usonian houses have a lot of like pegs that hold the wood together so that you don't actually need expensive screws and brackets and mountings. Everything's designed to kind of click together. If you want to see one of the Usonian homes in Alabama, you can actually go up to Florence, Alabama, and we have one here, even though that's not what you associate with Frank Lloyd Wright. There is one in Florence, and it's a very cool house. So, anyway, Charles Eames really liked this period. He meets his wife, Ray, while he's practicing as an architect, unlicensed, designing a couple buildings. And he collaborates with her on this design for a piece of furniture. And they design this chair that's a very beautiful chair. And they become happy with it and take it to be manufactured and offered at factories. And people are really struck by the design. But then he realizes that there's actually no way to make it. That the chair and the manufacturing techniques of the time wasn't able to be mass produced. And so it's a useless design, which kind of sets him on this period, on this like fascination with material, with technology, with compromise, with kind of trying to work within the boundaries of what's practical and also what's beautiful. And so they start to design, they start looking for a new kind of material that they can do something interesting with. And about this time, the U.S. military is looking for a new splint for World War II because the splints are metal, and if the metal's too thin, then it kind of bends, more of a aluminum alloy. If it's light, it's lighter, but it bends, and if it's too big, then it's heavy. It's hard to ship, it's hard to transport, it's hot. And so they began to experiment with plywood, which is kind of a new technology for the time, where you take strips of wood. It's not like the IKEA plywood that you're familiar with today made out of sawdust, but it's kind of strips of wood molded together, sort of like this. And they start bending the plywood and realizing that they can make a very light and a very strong brace that's molded to the exact shape that they need. It's kind of before ABS plastic is able to be used in that way. And so the splint that they sell to the U.S. military gets him some renown. And then they go to work on their new furniture series. And what's interesting about Charles and Ray Eames to me is that he wasn't just a super high-end, esoteric designer. Like a lot of the furniture at this time has that kind of like very high-end materials look. Mid-century modern furniture, there's kind of a trend that I'm not really wild about, where you use a lot of chrome and make it look like a machine. So like Le Corbusier, when he makes his like chaise lounge, it has like chrome and leather and like different types of leather and like a fur on it. And it was, modern design, but it was for an extremely high-end audience. Charles and Ray Eames wanted to build chairs that were available to everybody. And so plywood is this interesting technology where they can start to mold these chairs out of, and then later fiberglass. But at the beginning, plywood to create things that were very beautiful and modern and had a very definite minimalist aesthetic, but also were affordable and could be mass produced, or could actually be built at scale. So after he attained some renown building furniture for the Herman Miller Furniture Company, Charles and Ray Eames start designing this Eames chair that I'm sitting in. And the Eames chair was supposed to look like a very well-loved catcher's mitt that could hold you. It doesn't recline. It's just put kind of at the perfect angle for you to sit back and relax. I probably won't put my feet up when I'm doing therapy, but it's a very nice chair when you just sit in it without the ottoman. because it lets you sit at a nice angle. It kind of keeps me back so I can hold a notebook or something. You can do a very long day in it. But the design of the chair was supposed to kind of be an unfolding piece that as you rotated around it, you would continue to see more parts of it. And it was originally offered only in black leather. It's never gone out of manufacture. It's one of the most iconic pieces of American design. It's still being manufactured by the Herman Miller Furniture Company to this day. And originally it was offered in palisander, which is what the chair that I'm in, veneer on the outside, walnut, and also rosewood, and it was only offered in black leather. They have made some other versions throughout time. I think there's fabric versions now that Herman Miller makes. In the 70s, they sold some corduroy ones that were kind of interesting that are no longer around. But the chair becomes a really big hit. It's kind of a take on an English lounge chair, like a reclining kind of club chair. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's a really interesting piece of American design. I think more importantly than the chair, though, that Charles and Ray Eames are very interesting people that kind of have an interesting story. Charles and Ray Eames, after they design the chair, they go and design a house together. And the house is neat because it isn't much of a architectural design. If you look up pictures of the house, it's more of a warehouse with just two open walls built out of extremely inexpensive materials, which is kind of a hallmark of his style, is just using things that are very cheap or very everyday and then turning them into something that's kind of beautiful and aesthetic. And so the house has, panels of colored glass, a lot of open air, mostly open space, just like a warehouse, like almost a Sam's Club or something like that. And then they use materials and hanging boards and bookcases to sort of suggest rooms within the space of the house. It's really cool. I hope to one day see it. I've seen a lot of videos and pictures of it, but I've never been there in person. And this is where they do most of their collaboration and work. And then at the end of, towards the end of Ray Eames' life in 75, he does a giant traveling exhibit that's unfurled at the Met, and it's for the Bicentennial celebration. So it's about Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. And they have all these artifacts from Monticello, artifacts from their life, and the exhibit is brilliant, but it's not received very well because people don't really get what it is. Ray wanted to organize all of the information and all of the material in a way that was contextual. So, you would see one word about the Constitution, and then there would be an arrow or a line or a string that took you, if you wanted to see the document or learn more about it, to another part of the museum. And people were just kind of confused by this informational flow, all these lines, all this kind of, it was too much and it was overwhelming. And Ray Eames actually dies, I believe in 78, before right at the beginning of the 80s. But what he's doing at that time is he's bumping up against the internet and the technological limitations of the time. There's this idea of hypertext, that you can be reading a story about, the Constitution and say, well, what is this or what happened that year, and be taken into more information. He's trying to give the user control over their experience of receiving the information within the exhibit, which is too much for people, but it's a very fascinating idea. Instead of just going and saying, okay, here's a sock in the museum, and then here's a plaque about the sock, you can say, wait, where is it from? Who made it? And you have control over that experience, much like we do now with the internet. And he's sort of trying to push outside of the time that he's in a way that, unfortunately, people didn't see then. So he's a very interesting guy. I would look him up. He also is a designer who works during a period where women weren't allowed to design with his wife. He always gives equal credit to everything that they collaborate on to her, which is kind of forward thinking. And I think it's a beautiful piece. I hope that one day I get to see you in therapy and you can come in and see my chair. So look forward to seeing you all in the new location. It's still not done, but hope to be going in November. Take care. So 2 points that I forgot to bring up in the video, and one of them is that if you haven't seen one of these in person, it's really hard to explain how good the wood looks. It has a whole lot of depth, it has a whole lot of glow. One of the common criticisms of when people see pictures of this online
is that it looks cheap. I think in the years after Ray and Charles Eames used plywood in this kind of revolutionary way to make it pretty, there was a lot of use of veneer or wood printing that we've kind of associated with cheapness or bad quality, like a 70s vinyl wrap on a van, or the kind of cheap plywood that you see at a lot of the stores on cheap furniture that's kind of packed with sawdust and then veneered over that, or the MDF, medium density fiber wood, that I'm not a huge fan of in furniture. It's hard to understand how good this thing looks up close. If you haven't seen one, I'd recommend doing it, because they really did build this in order to be beautiful, and they succeeded. I mean, the second point is that the Herman Miller Company sold this chair. It was designed to be affordable. It was sold for about $500 for probably 15, 20 years. Recently, they've decided to sell this for $8,000, which is crazy. Don't buy one from the Herman Miller Company. This isn't something that it's worth. It's not what the chair was designed to be sold as. There's a lot of people, since the design is out of copyright now, that do replicas of it that are exact replicas. If you do exact replicas, you want to make sure that you're getting top grain leather, not genuine leather. Genuine leather is not really leather. It's the pieces of leather fiber glued together in plastic. It isn't actual leather. But if you get a top grain leather chair, you can usually find one for about $400, which is about what the chair should cost. So I just wanted to add that it's a pretty chair. It's a really nice chair. It is not an $8,000 chair, and that is not what I paid for this one.